Okay, so one thing that always hops out at me when I think about cryptids is I think, well, like I was telling you about the quantum Bigfoot kind of thing. And a big part of my questioning there was like, okay, well, is Bigfoot an animal, or is it something that's using technology to do this? So a big part of the cryptid argument is supernatural versus evolutionary, stuff like that, like zoo escape with the panther, hidden living fossils, all sorts of stuff. But dogmen does not fit any sort of evolutionary deal. Yet they seem to be such a regular topic. So what's kind of the history of dogmen sightings out there? Because that was definitely a part of your pitch of what you got going on here, and I'm real curious about that one.
Well, I'll be honest, the dogman phenomena was sort of something that we stumbled upon while we were out there. Obviously we did tons of research before we actually went out to shoot the trailer. And I'd heard reports of surrounding areas having dogman encounters. There's a place near Palm Springs, which I think is about 60 miles from Anza-Borrego. And there's several different dogman encounters from that area. But when we talked to this gentleman, Coyote, that you see in the trailer there, he talked about his friend seeing one on the other side of Salton Sea, which is a large body of salt water that's right outside of Anza-Borrego. So again, we don't know if that's something that people see there often. There's a handful of reports that we've received and that we've uncovered in our research, but anything's possible. I mean, a lot of people talk about these window areas being a thin veil. There being a thin veil between this world and the next, whatever the next happens to be. And if it is, like you said, another dimension possibly, maybe these things are slipping through that, and places like here, Sedona or Point Pleasant are just a bit thinner.
But as the skeptic rational mind in you, don't you think it's like really weird that the other dimension would be occupied with dog people?
100%. Yeah. I mean,
it
makes no sense, but
animal hybrids at all. Yeah.
Because don't get me wrong, I love this stuff and I want it to be real. So I don't mean to be making fun of anybody out there who had an experience. That's not what I'm saying. I would love a lot of this stuff to be real, but it's hard for me to wrap my brain around dogmen.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, it's my favorite cryptid, and I still have a really difficult time not only believing in it, but swallowing a lot of these pills that I hear. But the stories are so fascinating. They're so amazing. And this creature is so amazing. I just, I hate to admit it, but I might put a little bit of that to the curb and just kind of go with the story more than thinking that it's a real thing.
Sure, and you got to ask yourself, everybody's all, oh, that's anecdotal evidence. But, how much anecdotal evidence do you have to throw on a scale for it to tip it? It's and when there's a lot on there, like we've had Linda Godfrey on our show, and she's sort of famous in the Dogman werewolfish community. Sure. And she had a lot of interesting things to say about him. Kara is all about the Dogmen. Kara's favorite is Mothman, and to me, those are kind of supernatural ones. So they're kind of hard for the hard science guy in me to really get my hands around. But in there, you also cite hairy hominids separately, which I assume is more of like a Bigfoot sighting or something like that.
I'll hit this real quick, David, and you can hit the back end of that if you don't mind. That was something I was going to bring up a second ago, was that maybe people seeing these quote unquote dogmen are actually seeing the Borrego Sandman. Now, this thing's described as being much more gaunt, skinny than the other Sasquatch in the rest of the world, or I'm sorry, I should say America. It's if it has that appearance, if it looks skinnier, is somebody going to look at that and think, oh, it's an upright dog? Is there just something about the appearance that makes people think that? It's also said to be like a light tan color, which would be beneficial in the desert. That's the main color out there. When
I was thinking that about the black helicopters. I'm like, why would you want that out there?
Exactly. They stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
So, it's possible that somebody is seeing, this Yucca Man or this Borrego Sandman and just mistaking it for what they heard about the Dogman, Beast of Bray Road, that kind of thing. David, if you want to piggyback on that at all.
There's a few encounters where they actually say that they have seen a face on these hominids. And some people go so far as to say they actually mistake them for people out there, maybe like old prospectors or, who knows what, but when they get up close to them, they see, no, this isn't the face of a man. It's some kind of beast that has very human facial features. And from our research, it doesn't really seem like there's much crossover between Dogmen and Sasquatch, just because the faces are two distinct things. You've got the long snout on this hand, you've got a flat human-like face over here. So a lot of times it's people catching a glimpse of something, and it's this hulking form, very hairy, still kind of gaunt though, like Derek said. And if you only see it from the back or the side or in a flash or running across the highway or something, it could be either of those things. But that's what we found so far.
Last year, we had Lyle Blackburn on to talk about the Bishopville Lizard Man. And one topic that we discussed was that there are Sasquatch hominid sightings down there, and that maybe the mud was clumped in the hair to the point where it looked like scales. So there's lots of different ways that, I can guarantee you I'm going to look at something differently if I'm looking right at it than if I'm looking back while running. Which is pretty much how you're going to go into this. The horror movie fanatic in me, you say two in there, the Sandman, I think you're saying, and then Yucca Man. And so Yucca, of course, makes me think of this great post-nuclear old horror film called The Beast of Yucca Flats that I just loved. But in the case of both of these, are we dealing with, we think, of course, we don't know what we're dealing with, but these are Sasquatch style hominid sightings?
That's what it seems to be. And these sightings have been reported for hundreds of years in this area, not only from the Native Americans, but like I said earlier, the Spanish missionaries that came through the area. They reported not only the Native Americans telling them about it, but there's a few reports that we found of them describing these creatures themselves. So we don't know, of course, we don't know what they are, but it seems to be the same creature that's in this area. It just has a different name depending on which little region. If you're near Joshua Tree National Park, they call him Yucca Man up there. If you go to closer to San Diego, it gets a lot more green and more lush through that area, and they call them Zoobies up there. And that seems to be a very active area still, whereas the deserts seem to have dropped off a bit as far as these upright hominid sightings are concerned.
David, you referred to Zoobies earlier. Is Zoobies a singular name or a plural one?
From what I've read, it's a plural one because a lot of that comes from one family's story. If I remember correctly, there's a family, a doctor, I think it was, that was living up in the hills outside of San Diego, and there was several of these creatures that were messing with him and his family. I don't recall if they were necessarily dangerous or if he felt fear from them. I think it was a lot of mutual curiosity, if you take my meaning there. So there was a lot of research done by the time, and I think there was a sheriff or Derek, wasn't there a law enforcement or was it a journalist? Somebody covered that story specifically.
I think there was some sort of police involvement. I remember a lot of these tend to run together, especially if you don't have the information in front of you. But there was some sort of involvement with law enforcement doing some sort of investigation. And I think they had an experience. This was near the town of Julian, California, I believe.
Yeah. And so a lot of what we know about Zoobies in particular comes from that. And in that one, it definitely seemed like there were multiple entities involved.
Yeah. Right. And some of the reports list that there's, several of these creatures in one experience.
Yeah. The Borrego Sandman too. There was an account of a family living in a cave that someone happened upon. And they, kind of yelled him away.
Well, again, that helps the science skeptic in me because, you think, okay, the first thing any science angle cryptid researcher is probably going to think is breeding populations.
Yeah, reproduction.